Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Building Big with City Skylines, episode 62. I'm Enigmius, and today, learning a few things. I don't know if it'll be helpful, but we're learning a few things. We've expanded our city, and we can continue to expand our city for pretty much as long as we want. Except I'm realizing now that I put this tower over here, and it was probably a mistake because it's going to be getting in the way of the next expansion. I added these guys here, these 4 assets, just like we had before, and kind of placed them around and joined everything together so that they resemble one giant asset, and I ran a highway through it, which seemed like a really good idea at the time, and I don't regret it yet, but I may. It's just a question of time. The whole idea behind having the highway go through here is we want to have a quick and easy way for people to get out of the city proper onto the highway to somewhere else, and we want to get it in place as soon as possible so that we don't have to come back later and dig through our city and make a gigantic mess like we did in our first city, trying to get it through and running the way we want it to, which in this case is mostly straight. Now you could see it stops being straight. It's the exact opposite of straight up here, and that's only because we haven't purchased this tile yet. Once we purchase the tile, then we can run it straight through to this disaster right here. We'll redo this, and then we can have the nice intersection, and everything will work just fine. But for now, this is the mess that I made. So, last episode we were looking at solar power, and the disappointment of having solar power basically stop working at night in a city that's primary power generating facilities are solar. It was a bit jarring. It was a bit unpleasant to suddenly realize we either had to disable that fantastic looking night scenery or switch to a different power source depending on what was going on. So the decision, we'll just cut to the chase first, and then we'll talk about some of the things that I've picked up on since then. The decision now is we're going to continue as we are until we reach 44,000 people, at which point we'll unlock nuclear power and we'll switch to nuclear, and we'll move the solar power plants out of the way somewhere over here probably until later in the game when we can do a little bit of micromanagement if we really want to feel proud of ourselves and have actually kind of a working system that we control within our city. So right now, this is pretty straightforward stuff in terms of the zoning that we're doing. It's all high-density residential, high-density commercial. Actually, the commercial is in the central area here, and office space. There's no dirty industry. There's no low-density residential or commercial. It's all just the 3 big, tall, gigantic buildings and everything that we need to support them. We've done a pretty good job so far of cleaning up the extra assets left lying around, slowly getting rid of them all. Right now we've got a cemetery here that we have to empty, a couple of dumps that we have to empty. This one here is empty, but we have nowhere necessarily that I want to put it now, so I'm just leaving it there. We can move it whenever we want to, but for now we don't have a spot for it. And we have another cemetery there that we would have to empty. It's nearly full. It's a 2480 of 3,000 capacity for dead people. And over here, this one's also 2/3 full, 2,000 of 3,000. We've got some water pumps and sewage outlets still available to be turned on whenever we want. And if we look down here, we've got a crematorium, firehouse. That's really it. And then we've got this little thing here that we set up, which is largely parks, some more firehouses, a crematorium, a medical clinic, and train stations. We've got lots of train stations. Once we get some of these parks and firehouses cleared out, then we can grab this last remaining train station over here, and we'll tuck it in here with the rest of these guys, and then that'll be the last of the assets that we have to work with to get rid of, incorporate into our city, and we'll be free. We'll have a nice clean landscape. We can do whatever the hell we want. Now, speaking specifically of this whole thing with the solar power, some people, depending on where the conversation took place, some people agreed that it was maybe not necessarily a reasonable kind of approach. Some people were very, very angry at the suggestion that it was not a very well fleshed out approach to changing solar power as it happened at nighttime. Discussions taking place basically that solar power plants in the real world have functions built in so that they can still send out power at nighttime and when things are overcast, because they store it when they are able to generate power. And that's kind of the idea that I would have liked to see personally in the solar power plants, or something a little bit more upfront from the developers saying this is going to be a radical change to how these things are going to be used, and you might want to think about this, this, and this before adding them to your city or expecting that your existing cities are going to be able to continue on working with them. The one thing that I did notice, actually there's two things I did notice. The short one is that very, very angry people saying that when nighttime comes around, the whole city's power consumption goes down dramatically to between like 20 and 25% of what it uses during the day, and that's why solar power is okay the way it is, because you don't need the power, which was, for my city, absolutely not true, because I did some tests that involved loading up my city. Now, rather than yammer on forever about what I did and what it showed, I'd rather just show you guys exactly how this whole idea of this dramatic power reduction during the nighttime because people aren't working and doing all these things, and that's why solar power doesn't need to be there, because you don't need as much power. During the day, with the day-night cycles turned off, my city is using 181 megawatts of power. The electricity consumption is 181 megawatts, as indicated here. Currently, I'm producing 187 megawatts, which means I'll have to turn on this solar power plant very soon. If we go on into the options and we use day-night cycle, and then we resume game, and then we speed it up because we want to get it to nighttime as quickly as possible. And then we kind of keep an eye on things because this is going to fluctuate a little bit. The consumption, because the city is going to change. There are going to be more buildings added and upgraded. You can see buildings are going in down here. So it's going to change a little bit. But we're still sitting on that rough estimate of 180 to 185 megawatts consumption. Now, quickly, before everything goes to hell, if we look at our consumption, it's still 187 megawatts. It's gone up a little bit, but like I said, we're adding new buildings, things were being zoned, it's understandable. Electricity production is about the same as it was, and so now we know it's nighttime, but we're going to keep it in this view so that when we see everything go out of power and the solar power plant is no longer generating anything, we'll see a reduction in the energy production that reflects the 160, I think, megawatts we're going to lose from the solar power plant. But what we also want to see is whether or not our electricity consumption changes in any way. No. It doesn't change. It's basically, it's going down a tiny, tiny bit. We're talking about single-digit reductions in the power consumption of our city. It could be related to people just being pissed off and moving out because they haven't got any power, they haven't got any water. Every time they flush the toilet, it just blows up and splatters all over the roof of their ceiling of their bathroom. They're not happy. They're not happy. The power that I'm producing now, for those who maybe missed last episode or forgot, is just from our garbage incinerators. Incinerators produce a little bit of power as they're burning garbage. So that's nighttime. This whole thing that we're saving all this power at night so we don't need the solar power. In the generic game, the way it plays when you first unlock solar power plants is not true. However, we do that, turn it all back on, that's the power we have. We get all the water, we get all the power, all these people saying our land value is low, that's going to correct itself. I would suspect, again, that that's why we lost or saw any reduction at all in the amount of power we were using is people moving out because the land value took a dump. But you see here, I'll just bring this up very quickly, and I haven't done any testing. I was looking at this and I was making some changes because when I was trying to fine-tune the budget of my city, when I was recovering it from basically dissolving it, I went in and I made some changes to reduce certain costs in certain areas, and I noticed that you can fine-tune now the budget for your different services for day and nighttime activities. If that has an influence on power consumption, then that would make a little bit of sense that you would be able to reduce, for example, I don't even know, schools, reduce the school's budget at night because nobody's going to class at 12:30 at night, and see if that reduces power. The schools turn the lights off at night now because no one's in them. Does that help? I don't know. At some point we might do a little bit of testing once we've got enough of a power consumption that we can create enough of a difference potentially between the two things that it justifies having a solar power plant that just gives it a bit of a boost during the day, and then at nighttime the services that reduce their service levels and reduce power theoretically would make up for the difference in power that we lose when the solar power plant shuts down. The only other thing that I can think of is that it's dirty industry that's doing that, you know, the massive power difference that people are talking about. If you've got a city that's running on general industry or specialized industry like agriculture or ore or oil, those may be shut down at night, which isn't necessarily realistic because when you've got big industry working in an area, time is money. A lot of their oh, look, the sewage. It's having a hard time keeping up. A lot of the industry keeps running overnight because their overhead is the same day to day to day in a lot of categories. So the more they operate out of the 24 hours everyone has to operate, the more money they make because they have a higher margin over the overhead. I mean, we're starting to get really technical and we're starting to compare it to the way things work in the real world. All that means is that we're guessing. It doesn't mean that it works that way. It just means we're kind of looking at real world examples and trying to pull it together and make sense out of something that is kind of a pain in the butt, because the reason why we have these solar power plants is that they were unlocked at 22,000 people and they were the best option available to us by a wide margin. That's all I've got. So for the next episode, the goal is to get as close to 44,000 people as we possibly can, tidy up this area here, probably move it out of the way, maybe even just move it over here, do a little bit of expansion up here. I don't know if we'll be able to unlock another tile. If we do, it's probably going to be this one that we unlock anyways. We aren't necessarily going to be able to expand in this direction here, but we'll do something up here, and then maybe we'll think about some more custom assets to take advantage of the space that we have and do some crazy things. Well, we'll see how it goes. If you want to be notified about that video, as always, you can subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media in the information box below the video. Leave your comments and feedback. If you have theories, by all means, feel free to leave them. Just keep in mind as you're describing your thoughts that it is a theory unless you have proof. And if you don't have proof, please don't instruct people on how to play the game based on guesses. It's not nice. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.